So 2020's been one hell of a year for just about every human being on the planet, which has made it hard to make dyspraxia content as of late. So much so that I actually started a series on a Black Widow spider. Yeah, she's still alive, it's just hard to really make content right now. Even harder to find bugs to feed that spider right now because it's winter, where the whole coronavirus is starting to surge like crazy, especially here in the United States. Doing my usual generalized videos on life with dyspraxia has been hard because life hasn't been normal for just about everybody right now. So to, say that I as a dyspraxic am going through something and trying to generalize it, it's hard enough as is because dyspraxia affects everybody differently, but now with the coronavirus, it's even harder. So trying to take that into account, as well as the distance learning and factoring whether or not someone's on quarantine or an essential employee or not, yeah, it's been really difficult lately. So a lot of people said they wanted to hear about what it's been like living with dyspraxia, at least here in the United States, in the situation I'm going through. So none of this is going to be really generalized, and I'm going to try to keep as much politics away from it as possible, despite the fact that I'm in the US and, well, I'm sure you all know what's going on right now in the US. So this is the year 2020 with dyspraxia. Another huge dividing point is the actual topic of this video, or not the topic because this video is more of a vlog style thing, but one of the key features of it being the novel coronavirus, also known as coronavirus or COVID-19. Unfortunately, here in the United States, a global pandemic is seen more as a political issue than an actual serious factor that affects our everyday day-to-day lives. Many people consider it a hoax, many people deny its existence, and this video isn't for those people. As someone who many would consider relatively intelligent, I stand on the side of science here, and I will define the coronavirus as far as I know from all the research I've been trying to do. But it is important to note why people are as hesitant to accept things as they are. For one thing, this virus is new. The 19 in COVID-19 stands for 2019, in which it first showed its ugly head in the face of humanity. Even now, we're learning more things about the virus, and one of the hardest things about it is its variants and symptoms, which makes it hard to really stick a solid definition to, at least symptoms-wise. We know it exists, we know exactly what it's doing to people, and yes, it is killing people. It has caused a death toll that is higher than most of the pandemics human history has ever seen. It's one of the few pandemics in human history that is affecting us on a global scale. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the election. As I define this virus, keep in mind that this is to be revised. And I know I'm pushing this very heavily, but this is important. There is no such thing as an exact science. Science is important because it's always evolving as we learn more information. That's why we subscribe to science. So all of this is possibly due to be revised. But this is the coronavirus as those in the scientific community fully understand it. COVID-19 is a specific strain of coronavirus that attacks the lungs almost directly and can have lasting effects on other organs as well. It does have similar symptoms to that of the flu, as well as even the common cold. And not all people are going to have the severe symptoms that would put them on a respirator or kill them. However, there are more than enough cases that are severe enough for at least hospitalization that has earned the classification of a pandemic, as it has caused multiple deaths, and not just on a national scale, not even on a local scale, but on a global scale. It is causing rampant deaths, as well as huge numbers of hospitalizations to the point that hospitals can't even take in new patients in many places. There are numerous symptoms for coronavirus, and detailing them all would be difficult. It can look like anything from a minor stomach bug to a common cold to a really, really bad flu. And major symptoms are commonly seen in those who are immunocompromised or prone to getting sick easier. They also say that if you do have a history of consuming cannabis or nicotine, as in if you smoke at all, you will also have a higher risk for having severe symptoms and possibly death. It's also important to note that many people will have no symptoms at all or just really light symptoms and have either what feels like a common cold or just a case of the sniffles. But these people are still just as contagious as someone who is dying of coronavirus. Now I'm going to talk about restrictions and being an essential employee a little bit later. Right now, I just want to focus on the fact that having dyspraxia alone doesn't really make you more susceptible to the coronavirus than anyone else, or having worse symptoms per se. However, being sick in general when you have dyspraxia can definitely feel worse than it would for anyone else just in general. Feeling worse isn't the same as being worse, but still, that's prevalent and it's important to note. Now, I've touched on this a bit in both injuries with dyspraxia as well as dyspraxic hypochondriasis mainly, in that we tend to be prone to getting sick rather easily, as well as also being convinced that we're sick when we're not. So, living in a time where literally everyone should be kind of terrified of this virus, yeah, it's kind of hard. It adds a lot of anxiety to day-to-day life that even as an individual with dyspraxia wouldn't usually be there. Now, I know anti-mask wearing is a problem just about everywhere because humans are humans, and unfortunately humans are stubborn and intelligently stupid sometimes. It's important to note that yelling at someone and trying to lecture them, however, isn't going to change their mind about whether or not they're going to wear a mask. Really, the only way to talk things over is to, well, talk them over. And on top of putting yourself at risk by interacting with someone who isn't wearing a mask, you're also putting a lot of effort into trying to push someone to do something that they don't want to do, when a lot of that effort is already being expended as is, just trying to maintain your composure. So it gets to a point where, at least me personally, and a lot of the people I know, those who don't even have dyspraxia, have just kind of stopped even bothering trying to convince people otherwise, or even just talk things through with people, because it's not worth the stress or the effort, especially here in the United States, with just how many people still think this is a hoax, despite the fact that we're seeing one of the biggest surges since April. Probably one of the worst things, too, is working somewhere like retail or in any real private business, where mask rules are actually supposed to be enforced. You see, as a private business, at least in the United States, they are allowed to take away certain protections that you wouldn't have out in the public, just as you would be able to do so in your own home as a private residence. So because of that, yeah, if you're going into a store and it says you need to wear a mask, wear a mask. You're supposed to wear a mask. And even if the employee agrees with your refusal to do so, it's still their job to enforce that rule. And therefore, and a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people don't realize this. And so they take it out on the workers themselves because they're trying to enforce a rule that they may or may not agree with. Now, obviously, I do agree with mask wearing. I think it's important. I feel like it's necessary. And I question the intelligence of anyone who refuses to wear a mask. However, it's gotten to the point where most of the people I know aren't even enforcing these rules anymore, because people just get so agitated and so mad over having to wear a piece of cloth over their face. And being dyspraxic too, I mean, empathy is our thing. We are very big on empathy. Oh, I have a video on that too. It's very rare to see a dyspraxic ever get hostile, even when someone is being hostile towards us. But in turn, we do end up just kind of taking the hits and then not being able to really do much about it. And so if you're working in retail right now and you have dyspraxia, you're not going to be one of the people fighting back. And it really takes a toll on your mental and emotional health as well. Now, as aforementioned, 2020 in general has been a really shitty year for just about everybody. Everybody's suffering with more than just the coronavirus right now. Whether it's the impact on the economy that the coronavirus has had, or whatever restrictions they're trying to put on, or the rocky state of employment, surprisingly. People are mad, and working in retail right now in general is just kind of difficult because people tend to see retail employees as sort of background characters in everyday life and see us as less than people. And I'm not saying that to imply that we don't have as much importance or that people don't see us with as much importance. It's just that from everyone's perspective, we're all our own main character. That's just kind of how personality and consciousness works. Typically, yeah, you do try to take other people's emotions and thoughts into account as much as you possibly can, but being humans with cognitive bias, yes, we kind of see the world from our own point of view, and that's kind of important. So when you're the main character and there's just this side character there that you're never going to see more than 5 minutes at a time, especially if you don't go to that place regularly, yeah, it's an easy target. Which, in a time like this, where just about everybody is pissed, being that target is emotionally difficult. And keep in mind, this is just the perspective of an essential employee. These people are upset for a reason. Not that it's justifying talking down or treating customer service employees like shit, because please don't do that. That's totally not the right thing to do. I mean, morality is kind of black, like, it's not black and white, but I think it's universally accepted that you shouldn't talk down to anyone, let alone someone who hasn't done anything to you. But still, we are all capable of doing crazy, stupid, and mean stuff when we are stressed or incredibly upset. And with a lot of family members dying because of the coronavirus, with the impacts of the coronavirus on the economy, as I mentioned, and also lockdowns. I can't say much about lockdowns because personally, I've never once locked down in this pandemic. And it's just because I've always been an essential employee. My job has always been considered essential. We provide various items that are considered essential items, so even if they do try to implement full-blown lockdowns, I'll still be working. There are numerous studies and even other videos on YouTube detailing what mental health toll is being put on individuals who are put through quarantine and unable to leave their houses. And I'm sure having dyspraxia and being on quarantine is probably just as difficult, if not more so, than being out here on the front lines, because now you have even more social isolation than you had before. But I can assure you, being on the essential employee end of things isn't much better, because we're basically constantly getting berated at least once a day. And that's if we're in like a really good neighborhood. Social distancing is impossible if we're going to have people out and about. That's just a given. We could try to social distance all we want, but people are always just going to get close, especially when you're somewhere like retail or you're in any other setting where you're buying something or interacting with people. It's a given that you're going to be within that 6-foot margin. And even then, studies have shown that, you know, the virus can spread more than 6 feet in some occasions. So social distancing is important. It does a lot more good than bad. But I understand that that's something that can't really be too enforced unless a lockdown is put on. Now, when it comes to lockdowns, my personal thought is I believe a lockdown should be important. I believe a lockdown is great, especially when you want to go and do what's called contact tracing. Contact tracing is essentially taking someone who has a case of something like coronavirus or even the Black Plague and then isolating them, like actually quarantining them, and then going down the list of everyone they've interacted with so you can trace that to its source and, aggressively deal with those who are actually suffering instead of, impeding a lockdown on everybody, regardless of if they've interacted with someone who had it or not. Problem is, contact tracing, as you can imagine, is very complex. It takes a lot of people to do, and it requires that there aren't more people spreading stuff around already as it is. So that's where a lockdown is incredibly important, at least within the first, roughly couple weeks to a month of a pandemic. And once you can start contact tracing, then things will get a little easier. You can start lightening on those restrictions. But the US kind of handled this response terribly, and those that did implement lockdowns didn't really have contact tracing guidelines in place. It was just kind of like, okay, you're locked in forever until we say you can come out. And even then, everyone was still going out despite the orders because nobody was actually enforcing it. Here in the United States, even when they tried to enforce an actual lockdown, people protested with guns about getting a haircut for some reason. Now, because this is a more personalized perspective, I'm not going to talk about the economy or the change shortage or any of the other, economic effects, including the unemployment too much, just because it hasn't affected me directly. And I would love to go more in detail because I know a lot of people who are unemployed right now, completely against their own will too. It's not like they're not applying for jobs too. As well as, surprisingly, there are a lot of businesses that need workers. And it's almost weird because for some reason there's like this roadblock here that's keeping them from meeting each other. And I understand both sides too, which is what makes it even more difficult to understand. So economics isn't my strong suit. I actually suck at math in general. So when it comes to the economy, yeah, that's not my thing. So I'm sorry guys, I can't do a whole economic run through of this thing. Another thing that really sucked this year was those wildfires that happened in California. And it's kind of interesting because I live on the East Coast, you would think that it wouldn't affect me. But when those wildfires happened, which is crazy because they were started by some gender reveal thing, which was nuts. You guys remember when that happened earlier? It was even earlier this year. It was only a couple months ago. But the smoke actually transferred across the United States. And many people on the East Coast, including myself, were feeling some minor effects from that. Mainly upper respiratory sinus issues as well as headaches, which added on to the paranoia of the global pandemic that also causes respiratory issues and headaches. So yeah, dyspraxia on top of smoke, paranoia on top of pandemic, that was hell too. And I mean, really all I have to show you guys is anxiety with dyspraxia. Yep, I think that's enough of me referencing my old videos now. Anxiety has been incredibly high this year for everybody, and dyspraxics especially. We are prone to anxiety typically as the result of our brain trying to do too much at once, or even just overthinking in general due to the way our critical thinking process works. It kind of makes us always overthink all the time. So 2020 hasn't been a good year for dyspraxics, or anyone for that matter. Murder hornets, on the other hand, I'm not too worried about. There's actually a couple of articles detailing how they're not as dangerous as people think they are. My focus is more on spiders and arachnids than, insects, especially those of I believe they're Hymenoptera? I believe it's Hymenoptera. That's the bees, ants, or no, that's myrmecology is ants and bees. So, social insects. But really they're not as dangerous as people think they are. It was more of those viral videos that kind of got big, like when camel spiders were first kind of discovered on the internet, and everyone was terrified of them, only to realize that they only really live in the desert and don't actually hunt people and aren't actually venomous and really aren't a threat to like anything except for smaller bugs. But I don't like ending my videos negative, and that's one of the biggest things that held me back from making this video, is just because I always like to try to put a positive spin on the end of my videos. And I think the coronavirus, if anything, is probably one of the biggest pieces of proof of how far we've come as a species. It's taken us 6 million years from the birth of modern man to be shaken to this core. And our resilience is showing. I mean, even now we're starting to see promise of vaccines as well, so that's good. So, I mean, we're starting to see a bunch of improvements still. So even though it took out a decent chunk of us, I mean, look, we're still all standing here. I mean, you're watching this video right now, aren't you? I mean, yeah, is it going to be over anytime soon? Probably not. Okay, I mean, never underestimate the amount of anti-vaxxers in the world, unfortunately. So even when the vaccines rolled out, it's still going to be lingering around, but we're getting through it. And a couple more restrictions, maybe a year and a half to another year or two, and hopefully we'll be out of this thing, hopefully. I mean, we're still steadily making progress as we always do, even with the pushback from anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers. And if you are stressing, okay, and you think you have coronavirus, 9 times out of 10 you don't have coronavirus, or you have a cold, or you have minor symptoms. The only time you should really panic is if you're suffering one of the major symptoms, which is complete loss of breath or very substantial loss of breath, as well as lingering chest pain, or like something wrong with your waking patterns, as in an inability to stay awake or maintain wakefulness. Not like, oh, I'm tired because I overslept, or oh, I'm not sleeping enough because I have anxiety, but actual inability to stay awake, like you're about to pass out any minute. If you are suffering these symptoms, then yes, you should seek emergency services. Otherwise, if you're feeling a little under the weather, or you're feeling like you have the flu or just a cold, then yes, if you can get tested, please get tested. Before anything, get tested. Make sure you don't have what you have. But up until even when you get tested, and even after you get tested, until you get the results, there's literally nothing else you can do. And one of the biggest things I've learned this year is that we spend so much time worrying about things that we have no control over. Not just us as dyspraxics, but people in general. And the thing is, at the end of the day, we only have so much time on this planet. Regardless of how religious you are or whatever, nobody knows what happens after this. So the time that we have to experience this world around us, as hectic as it is, it's episodic. It's like a TV show, but we're living it every single day. Why would we waste our limited, precious time on this planet worrying about something that we can't do anything about? It's just this thought process that everybody has, including I myself have suffered this before. But as soon as you get a grasp of what all you actually don't have control over, and you just focus on what you can actually do something about, not only are you going to open yourself up to more time to just relax, because hey, what else am I going to do? And there you go, you've got more time to sit back, relax, whatever. But you're also going to spend a lot less of your precious time on this earth stressed out over something that you can't do anything about. And if you get tested with coronavirus and you run positive, then yes, shelter, quarantine yourself, wash your hands, try to avoid people as much as possible, and that's about it. And if you do end up on a ventilator or horribly, horribly ill, then you know what, I apologize, man. I wish the best for you, and I hope that all of my subscribers, all 166 of you I believe I'm at now, are doing okay and are taking care of yourselves and each other. The world is a scary place right now, but just remember, you're not alone. even as a dyspraxic, not only do I have this channel here, there's much bigger channels that focus on dyspraxia too. But I also have a personal, I have a Twitter you can follow me at. I also have a Facebook page you can follow me at. And if you message me, I'll respond. It might take me a little bit though, because like I said, essential employee, I'm at work all the time. There's also the Our Dyspraxia Discord. And just if you need someone to talk to, especially when you're dealing with dyspraxia, it's good to just know there's people out there that'll listen, that kind of understand what you're going through. So I'm going to leave the link to the Our Dyspraxia Discord in the description, as well as a link to my Facebook page and my Twitter. If you guys really need someone to talk to, again, I mean, I'll try my best. And, you know, I know this video wasn't as detailed and as educational and as much of an Oren Milne video as most people would expect it to be. Even I don't have as much information as I can usually get when I research these topics as much as I do, because nobody does. Nobody knows 100% what even is going on right now. So, you know, best we can do is be there for each other, stick with each other, try to compromise as much as possible, and try not to stress as much as possible, because that's how us humans have been doing it for almost 6 million years now. That's all for this video, everyone, and you guys have a good one. Oh, little final thing, if you made it this far into the video. In more positive news, I actually got a girlfriend recently. So, look forward to relationships with dyspraxia one of these days. I want to see if I can get her to make a cameo. That'd be dope. You'd be like one of them vlog YouTubers that shows their girlfriend on camera all the time, awkwardly. Probably not. I wouldn't even subject myself to that if I didn't already pick up with this channel.